How's it, free range humans? Welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm speaking with somebody very fantastic, internationally acclaimed musician and guitarist, Derek Gripper. For more than a decade, Derek has been translating the kora, which is a 21-string Western African harp, onto a 6-string guitar. Classical guitarist John Williams calls what he does absolutely impossible, and then you heard Derek play. In this conversation, I was specifically interested in finding out what his philosophy is, what drives him. And it turns out that what interests Derek is mostly what can be taken away until only the essential thing remains. In his life, he has drawn on various techniques to accomplish this, including the Alexander technique, which notices the tension we've added to ordinary movement and then lets it fall away. The Montessori education, where a child's development is trusted more than it's directed. And he also loves the Japanese farmer Masanobu Fukuoka, who spent decades growing extraordinary crops by becoming increasingly convinced that nature already knew what it was doing. We're also going to talk about what drives him, his obsession with sound itself, and his relationship with beauty. Derek says that what I do is none of my business, which, coming from a professional musician, is a wonderfully strange thing to say. So, free range human, here's my question to you. How much of what you call yourself is actually yours? And what habits, training, ambitions, or ideas about who you're supposed to be has to fall away before something more honest has room to appear? I'm going to write extensively about that in a separate post. But for now, please listen to the conversation. And a quick reminder to say that the next cohort of Living in the Field of Beauty starts on the 22nd of September 2026. I've just finished the first round and it was really beautiful, for lack of a better way of saying it. I hope that you will join us and enjoy this conversation with guitarist and muso and brilliant human, Derek Gripper. So, free range humans are countercultural in some sense or some way. They have alternative ways of living and being and engaging with the world. And you are such a person.
Challenge accepted.
Good. So, we're going to talk about music, but kind of in a peripheral way, in the way that you've learned to live your life, using music as a teacher in some way, or your relationship with music as a teacher. And so, based on the research I did in the last few days, and what I know about you from various walks and such things on mountains, is that perhaps what Derek Griffith's life philosophy at the moment is something like the do nothing philosophy, or the what less can I do philosophy.
Yeah, that comes from Fukuoka. There's Masanobu Fukuoka, who wrote a famous book in the 70s called The One Straw Revolution. And I was introduced not to that book, but to his second book by a wonderful man who you also know called Anthony Baker. And Anthony Baker has until recently, for 30 years, been the proprietor and head priest of a venue, restaurant, gathering place in Observatory, Cape Town, called Ganesh, which is now, has a new life post Anthony. His spirit lives on, and it's become one of the most interesting experimental live venues in the city. Felix Leband is one of my most famous, also famous, my most favorite musicians from South Africa. And I just did a performance of a record we'd made a week before. We made a record in preparation for the performance. So it's become that type of space. But years ago, when I was visiting Anthony on his farm, he has a piece of land that he's been building cob houses and things for years in the Cedarburg. He introduced me to Masanobu Fukuoka. And the Cedarburg farm is actually called Niks is Nodig, which I think is great because it's not Niks is Nodig nie, you know? It's like not even the double negative is necessary.
True.
Am I right? That's kind of how it works, right? You wouldn't normally say Niks.
Yeah.
And that's the name, and it comes from Fukuoka's philosophy. And the book that he gave me, it was a photocopy of the book. It was called The One Straw. No, it was called, that was the first one. It was called Natural Farming, The Theory and Practice of the Green Philosophy. And I actually have a proper copy of it now on my bookshelf. I'm looking at it. There it is. And it's a wonderful book about this Japanese farmer who comes from a scientific background and through a whole process of self-realization comes to this realization that he wants to show his kind of epiphany about the simplicity and perfection of life practically to people, because he talks to them and they don't understand him. So he starts farming and he invents this farming called do nothing farming. And it's not doing nothing at all. It's a misleading name in that sense. But what it is it's constantly asking, what less can I do? What's getting in the way here? And it has been quite a good guiding philosophy for me, because I'm quite a complicated person. I like grandiosity, grandiose thoughts, big ideas, you know. I like that. So I can very easily get led down into into the rabbit holes, the rabbit warrens of needless complexity. And when you're a musician, you know, there's endless paths that you can go down. And I do. I go down these long, dark, torturous paths. But I always come back to, you know, what is it that I'm actually doing and how am I doing it? And I kind of drag myself out of the hole, and then I find like, yes. And, you know, the guiding thing for me has been playing the guitar, that act of playing the guitar, having this one guitar I've been playing for a very long time, trying to honor the sound that it makes in how that gets reproduced, you know, be it in a live performance or recording. So, you know, I bounce out into massive complexity and then I end up coming back to that thing. So that's the thread, you know, through all the mess. So when you say, you know, I have this philosophy, I laugh because there's a lot of wavering and complex stuff. But, you know, I learn a lot on the way. I pick up new things. But at the end of the day, from outside, it looks like I've just been doing the same thing for 20 or 30 years or so, which is, you know, trying to play the guitar and share it with people and learn what it is and how it can be, how you can carry on doing it.
There was a Datsun, there was a hamster, there was the R.
Where did you find that?
I've been stalking you online.
No, poor hamster. Shame, man. Heat stroke. Very sad.
Oh, shame. And so what did you learn in your childhood? What kind of a creature were you?
Let me think.
Complex.
No, not necessarily. I had an interesting you could say kind of a little bit of a multi-tiered perspective, in the sense that I lived in different environments. So I learned through that how to be comfortable in different realities. You know, it's a little bit like if you go to different schools, you learn a little bit more than if you spend 12 years at the same school, you know, and you see people who've had to move around a lot to different schools. So I lived in two different families. I lived in a very suburban, uh, middle class, not conservative, but just conventional family with my grandparents. Through years 2 to 6, and then again 13 to 18, something like that. And through them had that regularity of you have dinner at 6. There's a house. It's one house. Everyone lives in it. You go to school. There's money to pay for things. There's, it all works. And then I had, my mother was 17 when she had me. So, she was young. If I think back now, when I was 9 or 10, she was, she was like, what, 27? That's crazy if you think about it now. So, two of us drove
Yeah.
off, you were mentioning the Datsun Bakkie. We drove off to Daar in the middle of the Karoo, where she got a job as an English teacher. I was 10 and we went to live there for a year. The hamster didn't make it. And, we lived out on a farm 6 kilometers out of town. And you can imagine, a 28-year-old single woman with a 10-year-old living in Dar as the English teacher at the local high school. That's a different experience, and like making it work and finding ways around. It's a very different experience to like a, 2-parent household. My grandparents, my grandfather went to work every day in his Jaguar to the observatory and got back at 6, and dinner was ready at 6:30, and then they watched TV.
So when did you start playing the guitar?
I started playing guitar because of a man called Mike Hool, who was my music teacher at high school, Westford. I was playing the violin before, but the violin kind of got a bit confused because into R I couldn't get a violin teacher. So I spent about a year and a half learning piano instead there, and kind of forgot violin. So by the time I came back, I had to kind of try and relearn, and in order to do music at school as a subject, and they let me in, but just, you had to audition and all that, and I didn't really have my shit together. So that's, I suppose it opened up a gap, and I met this wonderful teacher called Mike, and he inspired me, playing classical guitar as an inspiring person, very, very kind of enthusiastic. He's inspired many, local guitar players. And so that sent me on that trajectory, and it fitted more me. I don't imagine I would have been a very good violinist in the sense that I would have had to play in an orchestra or work with other people, or guitar is a little bit more misanthropic, and that suits me.
Okay, and so he was very inspiring and he taught you how to play the guitar. Is he also the person who taught you the Calvinist work ethic?
The Calvinist work ethic, what is that?
That is something you said in an interview.
Oh, what did I say?
The Calvinist work ethic of Western classical music.
Oh, I see. Yes, I get grumpy about them. No, he didn't. I don't think. I taught that to myself. Yeah, I suppose I got my head turned a little by the university and the idea of classical music, and the idea that you had to strive for this thing outside of yourself. And it was a lovely idea, and probably was a very good way to spend those, early years of your 20s. You can get into so much trouble. So, the fact that I had this thing that I had to do, and that I felt, needed to take hours of the day, and obviously developed skills through that. This idea of practice. You sit down 8 hours and you practice, you have a metronome on slow, and you Tai Chi your way through long Bach sonatas or whatever it is, So that's what I was into and busy doing.
And was that your own desire to play well? What was driving you?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, obviously you have to have a certain desire, need, enjoyment of affirmation from others to spend your time perfecting, a performance. We can say, oh no, we're just driven by the music, but that's can't be true. I mean, there's music that you could sit quietly under a tree by yourself and listen to the music of the spheres. So yeah, I think, inspired by characters, people whose stories, even images of their stories, inspired me, and I wanted to be part of that. Musicians that you heard, I had a particular guitarist who was very inspiring to me at one point called Paul Galbraith. And it was one review I read about him because, there wasn't 5,000 YouTube videos you could watch then. So you'd never seen the guy. You didn't know what he looks like except the cover of a CD, maybe. And you couldn't go and spend hours watching all his 5,000 live performances. There was nothing. So all I understood of what he did was a review I read, which went back when they still did reviews of live concerts. And it was probably in a guitar magazine. And it was a review of this man playing this guitar in this dark theater with just a single spotlight, and he just playing with no applause for an hour and a half, and people just being absorbed in this moment. And that really appealed to me. It really appealed to me. That image, I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. Why? No idea. But that appealed to me, who knows?
Well, in Sangoma, we say that you have a type of spirit that attaches itself to you and will drive you to do something creatively.
Exactly. And unfortunately for me, it's never been as simple as the one spirit. It's always been contradictory spirits. So, I had him on the one side, but then on the other side, I discovered this musician called Egberto Gismonti, both of whom I've now met and know many years later. And Gismonti represented a kind of digging into the bowels of the earth. And when you're in the Gismonti spirit, you can't even stomach the spirit of the other guy, So these oscillations between these two things, and they remain, not the people, but the directions, remain for me. And of course, neither of them are me, So when you're looking for a train to get on because you want to just, woof, then you go, yes, this is what I'm doing. Well, that's what I'm doing. And it can be one or the other. And that's kind of the rabbit holes I'm talking about. And you get, and there's a wonderful sense of belonging when you realize, yes, this is what I want to do. This is who I am, and it can be anything from whatever religion, or we all love that security, and it's, it causes so much, strife and horror. But of course, what you do is none of your business. It's not, you don't go to a performance with an idea of this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do and this is the experience they're going to have. What a waste. So you go to a performance very unknowing and having no idea as much as possible, and that always works better. And that's the Fukuoka thing. Do I really need this idea of blah 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 type of music that I'm going to be doing? No, I don't. So it's that cutting away Occam's razor thing. Do I need that idea in order to do this performance? No, I don't.
Okay, so now you've finished your studies and you start playing the guitar. And from what I know about Derek Ripper, you played everywhere for whoever wanted to listen. And what is your playing like at that point? Are you playing very consciously? Are you playing lean? Are you very overly concerned with the music? What's happening inside of you at that point?
I started a process with a guy I was doing yoga with. And Victor and I started, talking a lot and working together and practicing yoga together. And at that point, I'd kind of thrown the guitar away. I put it in the pantry, and I was making a living as a yoga teacher, because it felt more aligned with my, at that time, romantic ideal of, what you could do with life, and guitar felt so, at that point, so corporate, It felt so like, you just saw these kind of
Stiff.
unwell people playing, and I thought, no, these aren't the people I want to be surrounded with. So I tried to escape. But through the process with him, we talked a lot about what music could be, and I started a series of house concerts where I played every Sunday, last Sunday of every month, for an entire year. And I invited, you don't have 20 or 30 people would come, different people every time. And that was an exploration of process. Every time was exploring a different process. I remember once I handed out little sort of meditation prompts. Everyone had a different one, follow your breath, sensation, whatever. And I was involved in mine. And so we had this kind of collective meditation with the music. And the music would have been whatever classical music that I was playing then. And I'd also made a record just before that, made two, one with Alex van Heerden called Sachtevlee, and one solo, which is my first solo guitar album called Blomdorens. And yeah, so it was like straddling these two realms of wanting to be part of what the classical world had and all the things it represented for me. Technical precision, ability, that sort of high ideal of mastery, and then the more kind of elemental side of just finding that thing that you do, and which I discovered and really touched on through the work with Alex van Heerden. So that process was the kind of process of working out, like, what do I want to do on the guitar?
So what strikes me about you, Derek, is that you've always had this incredibly exploratory, playful approach to most things in life. You like, okay, great. Let's take what I know about yoga and we can combine it with the guitar playing. There's an immediate crossing of boundaries and experimental attitude to the way that you do things that puts you apart.
I would say playful is probably would be more aspirational. It should be more playful, but I take it a bit seriously in the moment. When I'm in the exploration, it's kind of life or death for me. It only becomes playful afterwards.
Is it?
Yeah. When I realize afterwards that I don't care about that thing, but then I've integrated it, and then I pretend I don't have it because I don't think about it. It's just part of, so I'll do this life or death deep dive into something, be it yoga or classical guitar or whatever it is. And the boundaries are totally fluid. So there's always, everything's metaphorical. So the yoga, the way that you do yoga is reflected in the way that you guitar. When you're back on the guitar, you're thinking about it in terms of yoga. You're not doing yoga.
Yes.
You're thinking about, like, what does this represent? And so it's all fluid. There's definitely no boundaries between those things, for sure. There's a thing, if you're thinking Fukuoka, then how do you plug that in to, it's kind of modular in a way, you're thinking Fukuoka, how does that apply to this practice process? Or if you're going to a Vipassana course, how does that interact, and you pull out of these different things, but they all kind of click in and link together. Fukuoka linked to Alexander technique when I discovered that through a teacher called Walter Vaughan Jones, and the Alexander technique linked up with Montessori when I had children and started learning about Montessori's philosophies, and they were for me, they were the same thing being expressed in different realms.
So when you go on stage at that point in your life, did you have a sense of life or death when you played? What did it happen inside of you just before you started?
I don't know, because it would depend on the time and the time period. I can only say that the process of learning to perform has been a subtractive process. So
Yeah.
being involved in like practices for a while, like for yoga practice or meditation practice, or those types of things, and shopping around, working out, do you want to be, when you're on stage, do you want to be focusing on the sensation of your fingers moving on the fretboard? Do you want to be only listening to the sound? Do you want to be only involved in this world of sound? Do you want to be just following your breath and letting the music happen? All those kind of experiments. Or do you want to be, you've got a perfect idea of the perfect progression of pieces that you've worked out before, and now your job is to make sure that you do that. Is that what you're doing? So that whole, all that, those complex possibilities of what you could be thinking about and what could be driving a performance, it became rather this thing of I don't need to do this. I don't need to, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do this. So do I have to have a plan before I play? No, I don't have to have a plan. Do I have to know when I'm walking onto the stage or wherever? Do I have to know when I'm going to play first? No, I don't need to know that. Do I need to decide beforehand what I'm going to play to people? No. Do I have to improvise? No. Do I have to recite something that's been written before? No. And so that's been the process from all those experiments to now, when I can say that for me, the performance is that's easy. It's no problem. I was just on tour now with Baleke Sissoko, who is really the greatest kora player. The kora, Kora, is 21 string harp, just for those who don't know it. Baleke is a griot from a long line of musicians, uh, people involved in everything that being a griot is. And Kora has been a big, part of his family for a long time. And he's the guy. He's amazing. And he said to me, oh, the performance is easy. I take the pills for the rest of the time. Don't know what pills he was taking, but you know what I mean. So, for both of us, that's no longer, it's no longer a thing that you're thinking. I'm not involved in a life or death struggle as to what I'm going to be doing when I'm on stage, in the physical sense. And I think our collaboration together has been a real high point for me in the realization of that sort of Fukuoka philosophy, because Balake doesn't speak English. He doesn't, and I don't speak Bambara or French. So we don't have a means of communication. And when I say he doesn't speak English, like, he really doesn't speak English. And you have people who can like tell you what they want to eat in English. No, his English is slightly better than my French, and my French ends at like, yeah, I don't speak French, so so we have zero means of communication. So we were on tour now for 1 month together using Google Translate. I was joking in the concerts that we have 3 modes. We have this very simple thing that we can do with hand gestures. When you're talking, but actually the other person doesn't understand anything, but you're making gestures and they know what you mean. Do you want to go this direction or this direction? You can work that with hand. And then with the more logistical stuff, we used Google Translate. What time should we meet in the lobby? Would you like to make the sound check half an hour later so you can rest? We've just arrived. That type of thing, Google Translate. But then if you really want to get to the deep stuff, we had to use Gemini, some kind of AI, where we can really have that between us and it's translating for us. But that didn't happen often. So this thing of getting on stage together with no prior rehearsal, no common idea of what it is to make music, no plan. I have no idea what Balake thinks about and what he envisages as his role as a musician. I can think about it, I can imagine, but I don't really know. He comes from a completely different realm of music. He's not in this Western, commercial realm of thinking at all. I mean, he's lived in it and worked in it for most of his life, but he does not engage with music like that. So we don't know anything about it, about our, our own desires for the outcome of the concert. I feel that really felt like we were playing to these big audiences in the US now, had 1,000 people in the auditorium or whatever. And I didn't feel that he loves to play. He's 100% in there and he does it. But I don't feel he's leaving afterwards and going, wow, I don't think he cares. It felt like once the show was over, it really was over. He somehow didn't have anything invested in what people took away from that experience afterwards. I don't. But anyway, it's complete conjecture. But the performance itself is this very kind of pure experience of conversing through music, improvising, having no plan, starting something, responding. And it's great kind of improvisation because it's an improvisation with very limited means. It's not like jazz, where you have a massive language of possibility, a chessboard of possibilities where you can go. Like as the tour progressed, we used less and less, of the resources of our instruments and got simpler and simpler. And the journey got more and more kind of open and kind of complicated in a way. So that I'd say for me would be like like that's been the process for me that, through these different things, got to the point where I could actually do a tour like that with somebody. And it wasn't just because I learned some choral music on guitar. I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think it's because of this acceptance that, you can really not know what's going to happen in a performance and have nothing very useful to offer as a material resource to start with, and still you can have this whole thing happen.
So that is deeply countercultural. Most people would say you're going to rehearse, you're going to get onto stage, you're going to perform, do your best, try to do it perfectly, hope people enjoy it and that they'll write nice reviews about you afterwards. What drives you in your music when you play?
Well, I've been quite fortunate in many respects. Firstly, being a South African musician in a very niche realm of music. That's meant that there was no, I'm talking in the music industry. I'm not talking about the greater life support structures, which obviously I have had, but there is no music industry that that 20 years ago I could have got the attention of. And because I think a lot of, people still have this idea that like, I just have to get into the right magazine or the right blog or the right YouTube video, the right podcast, and then the career is going to take off. If you're a musician in South Africa, you've learned to be kind of DIY, and to a degree. And I work a lot in the US now, so I see people who've existed in a completely other thing where they've never been DIY in their lives. They wouldn't know how to organize a concert. They've never done a house concert. They did something that got people's attention, and then there was a manager, and then there was a booking agent, and there was a whole country to tour in, and they've been professional musicians, and that's what being a professional musician means. Here, it doesn't mean that. It means, you can find the waves and go with them and work out, So that was a lucky thing, I think, because it makes you think differently. And so we're lucky now as well that you don't do a concert in New York City to 1,000 people and expect to wake up the next morning to a review in the New York Times. No one reviews concerts. You know that when you do a concert, it happens. You'll get 15 shares on an Instagram saying, I had an amazing day with Derek Ripper and Balakisi Soko. And then your life carries on, and that concert is never thought about again, except by the people who were there. It's not going into any system of thought about music. It's not going to be reviewed so that it's in that magazine that I read about that guy 20 years ago. It's just, it happened and it's gone. That tour we just did, 21 concerts, we played to 10,000 people. over a 3.5 week period, which is a lot for what we do. It's like 500 to 800 people a night, with a few nights off. Finished. There'll be nothing more about that. It's over. It's over. There's not one review, not one printed review, nothing. So thankfully, you have to have a different reason to be doing it. And you have to have something else to come home to that's not, oh, I'm going to read my reviews now, whatever, or think that like that now did something that's going to mean something else further down the line. It's much more amorphous. Even playing with Balake is like, when we get to the dressing room, he's not saying, oh, gee, Derek, that solo you took, oh, that second piece, and then I was doing that, and then you took that solo, and whoa, that was really great. And then, oh, man, and I just, yeah, no, not a word. Just 10 o'clock tomorrow morning in the lobby, And then I'm like, yeah, just had 1,000 people standing up, standing ovation now. We're not gonna talk. No, we're not gonna talk about that. Okay. Yeah, 10 o'clock. See you later. So it's this weird, like, and I think, isn't that the world that we live in? Like an album is not a thing that you have lying in the car. It's just this picture on your phone, and it's a thing on a playlist, and everything's very disembodied. Your album release is just a little video moving of the cover on a Friday before it's available on streaming and people can listen to it for free on a thing. It's everything's very like, whoa.
Okay, so what's in it for you? Why do you do it?
No, I just really enjoy it. I really like playing concerts. I like the sound. I think a lot about sound, and I probably spend more time thinking about the reproduction of the sound than I do about what I'm playing. Uh, at different times, of course. At the moment, I could say that. Like, for example, I've got a concert at Kirstenbosch Gardens on Sunday, Kirstenbosch Summer Series. And that's, we've been playing beautiful concert halls. They're wooden, they've got, perfect acoustic treatment. It's all the chairs are going up and everyone can see you, and it's beautifully amplified. And you've got an engineer over there that's just looking after your monitors here, and then one for the house. And it's all, it's all really. And now I'm going to be on this massive, huge outdoor space, in this music that's designed to, draw people in. And then you're suddenly on this. So I've been thinking a lot about it. And the way that I'm thinking about it is just purely being on the mechanics of how I'm going to amplify and what I'm going to put into the chain. That's been my obsession for a few days. I've finally kind of broken through and I didn't care anymore. But for a few days, it was like, what happens if I do that? And if I put that, and I want to have it like this, and I had an ideal, but then I had to have the practicalities, and it went. Um, but what's in it for me is I want to go there, and I want it to sound good. I want it to sound good, and then if it sounds good, you can feel it. There's like a kind of a movement that happens, and it's very kind of. There's a granularity, and there's a kind of a rumble that happens, and there's a kind of cool vibration, and you can feel it here, it happens there, and it goes here as well. And then you just play one sound, and then that whole thing goes and it sends it out there. And it's a very tactile kind of physical experience. And if that experience isn't there, and you're just like fighting feedback, and you can't be heard, or it's loud and horrible and aggressive, then I'm just going to have a horrible time. I'd rather stay at home. And I can do that at home as well. And I do. Can amplify everything and put it on headphones or on a thing, and just, and just play. There's a great sort of, tactility to it. And so, touring is not very pleasant. Obviously it's a job. But my mind is not thinking, oh, I need to organize a tour because I need to make money. It's thinking, I need to organize a tour because there's this new thing I want to try out, or like, oh, that was really working in the last one, I want to carry on doing it. There's some kind of process of like I'm thinking I want to do a concert in South Africa after Kirstenbosch. I want to organize something. Now, why would you do that? It's just such a mission because you've got to do everything. You've got to kind of, you've got to find a hall. You've got to organize the ticket. You've got to find someone to do advertising. It's like, it's a headache, I wouldn't be doing that because I thought I needed to earn something. I mean, I do, I would, but that's not the motivation. The motivation is like, yeah, I really want to see if that, really want to have that experience. I really want to be in that space and have the sound working and see if I can just go by myself without Balake this time because I've been with him. So it's that kind of strange kind of vibration thing. That's a motivation for me.
So, Derek, do you follow beauty?
I don't know. I mean, it's a tricky word.
What is beauty to you?
Yeah, I think what I've been describing, that sense of the sound and what, like that's a motivating force, and what is that? It's something that obviously, there's like a material to a thing behind it. I've been doing, I've been taking photos for the last few years. I got an old camera. Show you. This is a Leica. It's made in 1960. It's got a little thing on the top which is obscuring it now, but it's a very simple, heavy. It's made of brass. It's a very simple mechanical device, um, which is kind of amazing. And I like things like this that are like when somebody got something right, and they really. And the same with my guitar maker is a man called Herman Hauser, and he's a third generation guitar builder. His daughter's now making guitars, and they have this thing that they discovered, their grandfather discovered, in how to make the sound move in the wood. It's very difficult to describe, but it's very unique, and it's the most copied guitar in the classical guitar world. For many years there were lots and lots of people copying, but you play the copy and it doesn't have that thing. There's a little secret they have. They know that you just need to shave off 1 millimeter of wood exactly there. I don't know what it is. It's probably something very simple. And he laughed at me. He said, "No, I don't tell anybody what it is." And I said, "But there's that old guy there. He's 82. He's working in your workshop since before you were born." He goes, "Yeah, he doesn't know it."
Oh,
you know. So, but his daughter, she makes her first guitar. I played her first guitar, and it sounded like that. I was like, oh, "Okay, you assholes. You need to, you need to let us know where that piece of wood that she's shaving off is." I really love it. It can be. It's kind of a grounding thing because there's a lot of, I could have done a lot of stupid things and complicated things if I didn't have this guitar. I would have like invented guitars with more strings and microtonal fretboards, and I would have done a whole lot of stupid stuff. But I always come back. I'm always back to this very simple 6-string guitar because it just sounds so good, and I can't let that go. So I always go to my little complex thing, and then I come back and I'm like, oh yeah, it's just this again. Oh well, and this camera's been like that. I've been taking photos, and I've got a little dark room in the shed, and I'm not a photographer. I'm not like, I just listened to Roger Ballon talking at the art fair a few days ago. Felix and I went,
mm.
and that guy, he's a serious photographer. I mean, he has been deep in that language for a very, very long time. And his photos are, so multi-layered, the drawings, the things that he sets up. I just walk around. I'm on tour and I've got nothing else to do in the day, and I take photos of boring things. And I really like getting that film back and seeing them. There's something just really exciting about it, that like this kind of little thing that caught your eye and it's there. So it's a very simple thing, which was the beginning of photography. Like Cartier-Bresson, he had a sort of, an art, a drawing mentality of geometry and that, but it was also just this beautiful whoop there. That image is created and then just beautifully printed. If you look at his book, The Decisive Moment, it's a big book like this, and they printed them in this process, and you can see the grain of the of the image and how it's put on, and the tonalities are so subtle, and so that kind of thing, really, again, it's like the sound. Like, yeah, the content is important, of course. Photo has to be something, but actually, it's just that thing, of like that you can do that. And I suppose that's beauty in a sense. It's just like a yeah, and the process of doing it was what's interesting. And I think that's the time that we're in now, right? I remember at university when they first taught me about programs that could play a score back to you, using MIDI. So you would write the music into the computer and then press play, and it would play it back to you like a computer. And then I just thought, okay, well, if this machine can already play the music back to me perfectly rhythmically without any mistakes and without any kind of buzz on the string or something, which is what 99% of classical guitar practice is about, not making a mistake, not forgetting the notes, not making an extraneous noise. That was the kind of process then. If a computer can do that, then that's none of my business. I don't need to get involved in that. The trajectory of that is that, that's going to be done now. 20 years later, we have computers that can do even more. And I feel that everything a computer can do is not our business. So we have to keep on working out. Like it keeps liberating us, basically. It's not that then it can do it for us. It's that we can not be interested at all in what it does. If a computer can play a guitar piece without a mistake, good. My job is not to play guitar music without mistakes. Fabulous. A computer can generate a perfect photograph in absolute clarity with wonderful lighting and perfect colors. Good. Photography is not about that. I'm not interested. I like a nice blurred photo that's like, this was maybe a bit, it was a bit too open, and I want to go print it in the darkroom and not get it right, and the paper looks nice. Yeah, that kind of, we have to keep thanking our AI overlords for liberating us from all these useless tasks. And hopefully they'll be able to fly off before they just completely destroy the planet. They can fly off to wherever they're going, or upload themselves into their data centers and go away. Bye.
Praise God.
Praise God.
Derek, tell me about the Alexander technique. What did you learn that liberated you in your playing? What techniques did you learn?
Alexander technique is very simple. It's this guy called Alexander, FM Alexander. He was Australian, kind of a difficult character, and as a result, it didn't become as well known as it should have. But it's remained a very powerful niche presence in performing arts, in re-education of humans. It's out there, and it's strong in many countries all over, and it's you'll find it in universities teaching uh, acting and music, and it's there. But he was one of those people who struggled with success, and he would like get in the way. Whenever there was something that came along that was going to make it more mainstream, he would shut it down because he needed to control it. So it's a little bit more niche than it should be. But in essence, and you can never, everyone, and any day you can describe it in a different way. But the, one of the simplest things is it's about what he called inhibition and direction. And the two are two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. Unfortunately, Freud came along and made bad connotations with inhibition. It became, what we know as the word. But in Alexander's sense, pre-Freud and contemporaneously with Freud, inhibition meant something much more constructive, and direction is really thought, intention, and how those things work together is really the health of us, the health of the mind, the health of the body, this kind of, and of course, they're not separate. So inhibition is what creates the space for the thought to happen in a way. on a big scale inhibition is what we've been talking about with Fukuoka. Do I need to be thinking this now in this concert? And we're using inhibition all the time. We wouldn't be functioning at all. Of course, we have devices now which are designed to erode our ability to inhibit. We have massive supercomputers designed to erode our ability to inhibit and make our own directions and decisions. So we're addicted to these little devices that and then we react and we do that all day. And inhibition, in Alexander's word, was the ability to see that thing and say no to it, quite simply. And then because you've got that space that the no created, you're then able to redirect yourself, which was the direction. You're able to say on a very physical, normal base level, no, I'm not going to engage with that, that hell of digital manipulation. I'm going to walk out the room and look up at the sky. And the inhibition allows you to carry out that other direction, and that's how they link together. And in Alexander technique, that's taken all the way into the physical postural sense, but not postural at like how the body moves, how proprioception works, how we react to the environment physically, and there's no gap between the mental and the physical. So it can be, it works in these subtle and gross ways, all linked together. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm. So, out of all of these techniques that you've learned, the Alexander technique, Montessori philosophy, um, the do nothing farming philosophy. I remember there was a philosophy when your wife was pregnant with your first child. She read a book about midwifery and how to bring a child into the world without interfering with the process.
Michel Audin, he was a French obstetrician, and also he worked it out as well. Same process. And what is it that there's discovering is that there's a call it a natural process if you want, although that word can be confusing. There's a process that's going to happen already, and there's a conscious mind thing that can obstruct that process. If that process is learning, your own learning, child's learning, Montessori's big discovery was that all the things we were doing to teach children were actually causing more problems than they were worth, and that actually learning was a completely natural thing. And the reason that children struggle to learn or went into fugues of confusion and acted out in different ways and became introverted or extroverted or, destructive or, overly passive. The reason these things happened was because their natural drive had been obstructed by the unnatural environment that they lived in. But in an ideal thing, you have this alien that comes to the earth and discovers and masters everything that they need to master through this kind of spontaneous play. And that's normal, that's just normal. Fukuoka discovered the same thing. It's like, oh, surprise, surprise. You go to a forest, you go to the Amazon forest, and these massive trees that are, bigger than skyscrapers are growing just fine. No one's coming and weeding underneath them and putting in fertilizer, but yet we need massive machines and chemicals and that just to grow a tiny, pathetic strand of rice. We have to flood and we have to do this and that. It's like, think about it for a second. Like, why is it so difficult to grow a carrot? But then outside, there's this tree the size of a skyscraper growing just fine. So he asked, what are we doing through centuries of acculturation? What are we doing that's making this so complicated that we suddenly now have to break our backs in a rice paddy field that's flooded multiple times, and you have to weed and you have to replant and you've got to do this, and then when it's over you've got to cut, but you've got to burn the straw. And he started saying, what happens if I don't do this? And what happens if I don't do that? And he just kept removing. And he ended up with this very beautiful method that he did for, 30 years, where he just had this rotating crop of rice and barley that happened winter and summer. And he very rarely flooded the field, just once and he had this cover of weed. He never weeded. One year he'd be infested with frogs. The next year he'd be infested with spiders. And they didn't harm anything. So yeah, he
Wow.
changed very much, our idea of the fact that we've been thrown out of the garden and we have to toil to fight it back in order to survive, which is the human nature.
So when you teach guitar now to students, how do you approach teaching guitar?
I've always been quite uncomfortable with teaching, although I do it a lot, but I have this kind of huge existential thing of like, what am I even trying to show them, And it's part of a self-worth thing. And it's also because I don't want to be that kind of teacher that listens to somebody playing and then goes, okay, now slow down, do this, bring out the melody here, or go home and practice these scales until I don't want to be that type of teacher, obviously, because of all the things I've been talking about. So the process of teaching has organically, since COVID, has taken a new, more focused realm. Before COVID, I wasn't teaching for a few years, even though I had been doing a lot through developing a method of teaching with Montessori. And I'd gone into Montessori schools around Cape Town and taught, I had a little group that would come once a week as well at one point using this Montessori method. And I made these, materials and blah, blah, blah. The COVID, I started this online, just jokingly called the Guitar Ashrama, which is a group of people who met up on as a WhatsApp group originally, in the full lockdown of COVID, and I started playing, and then because I was locked away in my house for a few months with 4 teenagers, I built that up into a thing. So I learned what I needed to learn in order to, get the video in nicely and get the audio in well. I'd never owned a sound card at that point, so I had no way of getting a microphone into a guitar before COVID. So I got all that going, and microphones and external camera and how to show people scores. And I explored lots of different ways and really using the technology and and I taught these group classes. They weren't individual classes, they were group classes. So like a led class, almost like a yoga class, you start the class and you move through, and the people are taking their guitar, and for 1 hour they are in that process, and and that has simplified over the years. It's carried on. There were a few hundred people during COVID. I think we're down a little bit now to maybe 160 actual members, and a much smaller group of people who've like really carried on with the live classes. I've started just doing audio now, much to everyone's horror. Um, so it's much more focused on like a really fantastic audio experience. Making it sound as good as possible, as analog as possible. Like analog preamps and beautiful warmth in the sound. And my idea is that people are going into that space, headphones or speakers, whatever. They got the guitar. It's now half an hour, and they are immersing in a process, and it's less about, oh, I'm going to go to 6 lessons and I'm going to be able to play this piece. And it's much more about, that's the moment when you're playing. That's what, are you learning to play guitar? No. You join the class, you're playing guitar. End of story. There's nothing more, it's like, you're not going to practice for a year. Oh, I'm learning guitar. And then after a year, you know guitar and then you play guitar. No, guitar is not doing all the other things you could do for half an hour and being with a guitar and listening to it and maybe somebody else. That's all it is. It can become more complicated, and you can learn more stuff, but that doesn't change your experience of it. Just because I can play complicated things doesn't mean that I enjoy playing guitar more than other people. In fact, it often means that I forget what's good about guitar and I get involved in learning some other complicated thing, So that's been becoming the teaching now of the classes now. It's kind of a leading people through a movement process of listening to something which at first seems very simple and then becomes more interesting as you listen. So then you learn about nuance and you learn how to be more sensitive with your fingers, and so it's also trying to get into the space of being in a single space. So the computer offers us the possibility that you can see my fingers moving. I could put a little score underneath and you could see the music, you could read the music, and you could hear the audio. That's three things. And Montessori told us very clearly that when you're teaching, you have to be in one realm at a time. If you're teaching somebody about the three colors, you don't want to be talking at the same time. Oh, so when you go to the beach, you sometimes see different colors. You see the thing and the things, and there's umbrellas can be red, and the spade can be, the sea is blue, and suddenly this poor child is on a is in his mind. He's at the beach. There's the sea. There's the waves. There's a shark. There's the things that he thinks about. There's the memory of going to the thing, and now at the same time, you want him to remember the names of three colors. Disaster.
So there's something about paying attention and how we pay attention when we're learning something or when we're engaging with the world.
Yeah, yeah. It's just again, it's just that thing of like somebody who wants to learn to play guitar. What do you need to do? You need to play guitar. It's very difficult to do now because we don't know how to play guitar, and we have a whole lot of ideas about, and that's the most important thing. It's a lovely story of Jimi Hendrix, like had a one string guitar that was totally broken. He just lay on the sofa and like made sounds on this thing, and that's how he learned, just on this guitar that didn't work, just trying to find sounds there. And as a result, he had this very, very advanced ear and way of hearing and understanding of timbre. And once they gave him a real guitar and an amplifier, and those two things could interact, and they could be feedback, and they could he was away because he had the ability to tune in and to hear that. Now, if he was a 12-year-old, he'd have YouTube tutorials and other musicians to listen to, and not just 3 vinyl records lying around, whatever he had. So there's too much going on. So, and yeah, what did was it Woody Guthrie had that sticker on his guitar? This machine kills fascists. And what can a guitar do? How can a guitar, kill the fascists of the 21st century? If you spend half an hour without your screen on a little piece of wood with 6 strings, and you give yourself that time not to react to other things that you think you should do, that's wonderful. That's time really well spent. That's a great thing.
Has this unlearning translated into the rest of your life?
Well, it keeps me it keeps me busy. I mean, it keeps me busy. So then it gives me like this project. Having a project that's your central project. I think it does make life. It's quite a great thing to have. I think when I see people who don't have that, I think, wow, life must be really complicated. How do you make choices? Because I mean, obviously I get distracted and I think, oh, it's important for me to do this, and oh, I should really have that, and oh, I should be. But at the end of the day, like, even if it's a year-long cycle, it still comes back to, oh yeah, I play guitar. And I need to do whatever I need to do in order to make sure that that's working well, because that's what feeds back to everything else.
If you look back over your life, what is it that you hope to have accomplished?
And I'm going to defer to Balake here as well, because we were having this chat in the airport a week or two ago. We were talking about, people who use music and engage with music as a business. And he said something to me, which was very much how I felt, but he articulated it well. And of course, you've got to remember that he's articulating this through his phone, talking in a woman's voice, a woman's computer voice back to me, holding it up. And then that's why I'm hearing it still in that voice. He said, like, there are people who who do it as a business. But and for me, I'm doing it because I want to reach my true potential. And I think that's, it's a nice, it's like a mystery of like, what do you end up doing? What is the possibility of what you were end up becoming? And that's an interesting project. So if someone came to me and said, I will give you the money to create your career exactly as you want it, I wouldn't be interested. I mean, I'd probably say yes, but it would be a bit of a pain, really, because what's interesting to me is like, how does the music keep creating possibilities? How does you do this thing and then that results in that, and then suddenly you're on tour with this person, or you doing this solo tour, or you make this record, and then that person hears it, and then they invite you. There's this lovely story that just unfolds, which is like what happens in our lives, and I and the idea of some kind of God coming down and saying, poof, I'm going to make your dreams come true. That's not that interesting, because then you don't get to see the thing unfold. So I'm happy for it to unfold as it unfolds. Hopefully, it does so in a creative and interesting way.